Hello, Joshua Boswell here. Today I want to talk about goal setting, not just any old goal setting. I want to talk about the reason why we set, because we've all heard over and over again that we've got to set goals and how important it is to make written goals and to make them simple. And there's all these parameters about effective goal setting, but oftentimes we don't know why we set goals in this way or why it's important to make written goals or to make goals at all. So today I want to talk about the neuroscience behind setting these goals and what happens inside of you so that you can increase that effect to reach your goals, to achieve your dreams, to have greater success faster in life. I found that when I know why something's happening, I can not only, do the thing that I'm supposed to be doing, but I can do it more effectively and more efficiently because I know the why behind it. I know the mechanism that's going on behind it. So let me start off, tell you a little story. When we lived in Springville, Utah, this was 2008, and we bought a piece of property, had about 2 acres of pasture land on it. Now, of course, in Utah, it doesn't rain all the time to make all your pasture land grow, so we had to get water to it somehow. So we did this thing called flood irrigation. Now, I was pretty new to this whole flood irrigation thing, and I remember the first night I went out there, I went and bought some great big boots, and I put those big boots on, and I had these hip waders that I put on, and it was a little bit chilly because it was in the fall, so I had gloves on and my coat, and I went out there, and my turn was in the middle of the night, so I walked out there, and I turned it on, I pulled it, and pretty soon water started coming down out of the canal into my little ditches and then out into my pasture. And I thought it was great. And that first night, everything went fine. It was just okay. Well, about every 12 to 14 days, another irrigation turn came up. So the next time it rotated around, it was in the middle of the afternoon. And so I went out there, I put my boots on, I got my hip waders on, I went out there, I turned the main gate to divert the water into our ditches, and it started flooding, and everything was great. And I went inside and forgot about it. It took a couple hours for it to flood that 2 acres. Well, not long after I went inside, I came back outside, and the whole front of the house, where it didn't usually get all wet, the whole front of the house was flooded with water. And pretty soon it spilled up over the front lawn and onto the sidewalk. And pretty soon the sidewalk had a couple inches of water, and then the street had a couple inches of water in it, and there was water everywhere. And I went back and turned it off, but of course you got 2 acres of water flowing down out to the front of the property. And sure enough, cars were driving by and had to slow down because it's a ton of water on the road, and pedestrians walking out across the front of our house had to get their feet all wet and try to, tiptoe and step around it. And pretty soon a police officer comes by and he says, hey, you can't be flooding the street and the public sidewalk. You got to figure out what's going on. I said, officer, I'm brand new to this. He goes, I don't care. If it floods again, we're going to cite you. I'm like, Well, my neighbor, who was an old farm guy, had a house next door there, and he came walking out to me and he said, well, pretty easy fix. I said, I'm happy to hear about this pretty easy fix. Just, tell me what I need to do. He says, all right, grab a shovel and a pickaxe and come with me. And so we went out into the back part of the pasture, and I saw that where the water had come up and over and had then, run its way down the side driveway. And he said, this is a real easy fix. And all he did is he had me dig a small little, about 1.5, 2 foot by 2 foot deep little channel along with the edge there. So as the water came, instead of moving out into my driveway, my side driveway, it just redirected and went back over into the garden spot and into the backyard spot and went nice where it went to. And I thought to myself, there's 2 acres of water. There's this, thousands and thousands and thousands of gallons of water pushing down here. This little 2 foot channel is not going to save the day. But the next time I ran it, sure enough, I watched that water and it slowly crept up. It hit that little channel that I had made and it pushed down. And the more that it flowed down there, the bigger the channel got. And pretty soon I had this, where I had only dug a small little trench, I had this nice canal running through the back of my property. Now, you might be wondering, well, what does that have anything to do with goal setting? It actually has a lot to do with goal setting, a lot to do with the neuroscience behind the goal setting. Let me draw you a little, now a warning, I am not a professional artist, but hopefully this will give you kind of the idea. So if we said this is your brain right here, and it's not a very good looking brain, yours is probably much better looking, but if this is your brain and this is your spinal column, again, probably not the best looking spinal column, but you get the idea. Here's what happens. Every time that you think a thought, a tiny little channel opens up to connect your brain and your spinal column. Because when you think a thought, your brain says, oh, I'm going to think this thought might turn into a physical action. So your brain sends signals down into your body produces action, your action creates results in your life. Does that make sense? Brain thinks the thoughts, pushes it down into your body creates action, action produces results. So every time you get a thought, the brain automatically starts gearing up to turn this into a long-term thought. So if you have one fleeting, simple thought, then maybe a little hairline crack appears or a little hairline canal or ditch appears in the brain. If you never think that thought again, never pay attention to it, never get in any emotional juice, it just goes there and eventually, whoop, it just disappears and it's gone. But when you give thought some earnest discipline, when you actually go back there and dig the furrow and really give it some attention, then what happens is it takes that one little thing and it turns into a fatter thing, okay? And then if you give it more thought and more attention, it turns it into an even fatter thing. And pretty soon that one little thought has created this great big canal, this big superhighway. Now, what's actually going on there inside your brain is your nerve endings are all linking up to create physical output inside of your body. And then that little superhighway that starts to get connected gets wrapped around by this stuff called myelin sheaths. And this myelin is amazing stuff. It allows your nerves to fire much faster, more efficiently. So when you think about creating a habit, what's happening is you're repeating the process enough in your brain that it's actually creating a new conduit inside of your body. Now, the reason we set goals is so that we can go into our backyard, into our brain, as it were, and we can dig that little 2-foot by 2-foot trench to direct our thoughts, this huge, massive power of energy and productivity and emotional and power that we have inside of us. We want to control that. We want to move it somewhere. We want to contain it. You and I are creators. We can create anything that we dream about, anything that the mind of man can conceive and believe he can achieve, right? So we have this ability to create. The problem is that most of us have our brain running in 20 million different directions. All that power, all that thought process, all that creative energy is being used somewhere else. So we're flooding the streets, we're flooding the sidewalks, we're making a big mess of stuff. Or at the minimum, we're not doing the things that we could do up to our full potential. So the answer is dig a little trench, create an avenue, create a process, and then allow those thoughts to ingrain that more and more. Feed it, program it, push it out there. So the first initial step is we make this right here could be akin to a written goal. We say to our brain, okay, Mr. Brain, here's what I want to accomplish. I want to do this. I want to have this kind of a house. I want to drive that kind of a car. I want to have these kinds of relationships. I want to make this much money. I want to do all of these number of different things. And when we write that down, what we do is we not only think the thought, but in the process of writing it down, we force the thought to gel enough to go down our spinal column, out our arm, into our pencil or pen or to our keyboard and actually physically do that. And in the process of doing that, we take a tiny little scratch of an idea and we create a small, weak as it may be, we create a little superhighway inside of our neurosystem that allows that process to start moving. And then when you say the goal or the dream, when you physically repeat it, you create added myelin sheaths to that process and expand that little superhighway and make it broader and deeper and stronger. And pretty soon, if it becomes part of who you are, then your goal will flow naturally from you. Let me give you an example of this. I want you to think for just a moment now how much money you made in high school. Okay, you got that number? How much money you made in high school? You got it? Great. Now I want you to think about what's the average amount of money that you've made in the last 5 years. Now think about that. So if you look at your books, it's almost guaranteed that over the last 5 years, unless you've done something dramatic to change this, you've made about the same amount of money year after year, right? Now here's the deal. When you compare those two numbers, I think what you'll realize is that in order to create the money in high school, you basically got to a point where you found a job, that you started making the money, and that sort of became on autopilot, right? And compared to now, it's the same process. The money number has simply increased. Why? Because the demands on your time, needing to provide for a family or have a roof over your head or an extra car or more insurance or whatever, what did all of those things were emotional triggers to create a broader superhighway into you to go through the habit of making that much money. So most people, they get a job, they get a salary, they get a situation where they're making a certain amount of money, and they basically do that on autopilot day after day, week after week, month after month. They're conditioned to go to the same job, to go to the same desk, to do the same activities, to repeat this over and over again because they have a superhighway already preconditioned. When you set a goal, when you have that written goal, you're essentially establishing the same process. You're putting in place the beginnings of a habit to do autopilot, whatever your new thing is. So all you have to do is begin that process. Just like I did, digging out that furrow, I created a path for all my creative genius to go. We all have creative genius. And I created that little path, and then my mind started moving all of my creative energy and my powers down that path. And eventually it became so deep and so wide that I just did it on autopilot. And you're gonna do exactly the same thing. So now my goal, my challenge for you today is, as you're looking at this and reading this, my challenge to you today is to sit down and to give some very serious, thoughtful thought to exactly what it is that you want in life, and then write that down. Focus on how much money you want to make, focus on the kinds of relationships you want, and focus on the kinds of physical health and well-being that you want. Focus just on those three things: your wealth, your relationships, and your health, and you'll find that that dramatically improves your life. Write down specifics on it. As you do, you'll increase. Read it back to yourself multiple times and focus on that. You'll find that increases. Anything you can do to increase this conduit, this superhighway in your nervous system, the more you do that, the bigger it'll get, the bigger it gets, the more you will turn yourself on autopilot to actually achieving and accomplishing that goal. Okay? So I'd love to have your comments on this and know what you do on a daily, weekly, monthly basis to achieve your goals and your dreams. So make some comments below. Can't wait to hear from you. Thanks so much. Bye.